Hello, everyone. It's time for another edition of Adventures in Careerland. I am your host, Adriano Magnifico. I'm the career lead at the Riel Arts and Technology Center in the Riel School Division. And we are broadcasting in the podcast studio of the Broadcast Media Program. That's one of the 13 programs in this very interesting little high school polytech center. It includes programs like applied business management, automotive technology, baking, pastry, broadcast, as I said, building trades, culinary, childhood educators, electrical trades, aesthetics, hairstyling, information systems, new media design, plumbing trades. It's a space where students choose to come from their high school programs in the regular high schools in Riel because they're thinking, I want a little more skill. I want to try something different. I want to figure out more about what I'm capable of doing. And this place is packed. It's packed with students in 13 different programs in small classes with professional teachers who understand how to build those skills. So it's an augment to the regular high school program that builds your reading and writing skills and builds some of your teamwork and communication skills. This place takes it to another level. And I'm super fortunate to work with student co-hosts, Zach Pichet, who's in the broadcast media program. Zach, how are you today?
I'm good.
What's so good about today?
Well, it's the first episode we get to record with a new guest, so it's going to be an exciting day.
Well, you guys were guests. You're selling yourself short. Zach was a guest, and Oma, I'm going to introduce in a minute, was a guest. Don't sell yourself short, but you're right. We have an actual live human being in the podcast center, which is pretty cool. And Oma, also known Yoma. We call her Oma. How are you today?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm always feeling really good and chipper.
That's good.
And what are you thinking about today? You're a busy person today, aren't you?
Yeah,
Tell
I'm
us
very
why.
busy. I'm doing the Skills Manitoba competition, and we've been like so busy the entire time, just like working and prepping for like the actual competition. I'm kind of nervous, but I think it'll work out fine. I don't know.
And did you expect this when you left your high school life from Glenlawn?
Nope.
How are you feeling about that right now?
It's great. It's going very wonderful. I'd rather have this than just like my boring usual day. But yeah, this is way more fun.
Okay, well, you're leading right into my question. It's a beautiful moment because I was doing a little reading. I always think about this. There's lots of studies about creativity in the world and what level of creativity you have. And there are studies. There's a famous TED Talk by Ken Robinson. And the title of his TED Talk is Do Schools Kill Creativity? Dun-dun-dun. It's an interesting TED Talk because his premise is that the school system kind of kicks the creativity out of you as you grow older. And there's some studies. I just looked up a NASA study from the 60s because they were looking for good people to work at NASA. Some of their employees they needed, and they wanted to build the pipeline of people they could bring into the space and they had to be really creative. And so they did a study with 5 and 6 year olds, and they found that 98% of them had this creative genius ability. And they followed them in a longitudinal study. And by the time they were adults, 2% of them had the same ability. So my question to both of you is, have you felt this kind of feeling in you that your creativity gets diminished as you go through high school? Zach, what do you think?
No, I find that it does get diminished in high school. It's very rigid the way they want you to learn, and you kind of have not too many options how you can learn in a typical classroom, and it kind of kills that inner child in you that you said those little kids have. I love it here. I think that this school, ATC, it promotes that creative side of learning that typically high school doesn't have.
That's pretty astute. I love that you said the inner child. I think that's a very interesting term. Oma, what do you think?
I agree with Zach, I think. Yeah. No, I think. I know I agree with Zach. Because back in high school, I feel like we're all conditioned to worry or like fuss about the exact same things. And just like, we're all like becoming the same people, doing the same things every day, worrying about our exams or tests, and just like there's no room for like other stuff outside that make you you. We're just like copies of other people, because you go to high school, you be like everyone else, you leave like everyone else. We're just kind of like the same people, and I just don't feel like it just heightens our like creativity in us. It's just we just do what everyone else does, and there's no creativity in that. I don't think there's nothing.
All right, thanks for those excellent comments. I think we'll shut down the entire school system. What do you think? That's interesting.
I agree.
I agree. It's interesting what you're saying, because the school doesn't mean to do that, right? And it's based on an older model, and I'm not going to go into in a lot of detail, but the whole notion of creativity is an interesting one to ponder, because I think it's the one that's going to turn you into the really powerful person who will work and live and love life in ways that the regular person can't if they're not embracing that side of them. So it diminishes in you. You feel like you're getting it here more?
Yes.
Okay, that's pretty cool. So I'm glad you're doing that. And this is a place that really attempts to nourish and nurture that creative instinct, especially in your program. And we're really fortunate. We have a really cool guest today who has embodied creativity throughout his life. This is an amazing life. And we're really lucky to have him as our first guest after you two. This is episode number 3. I want you two to understand episode number 3. We have Andrew Yankiwski, who is the owner of Precursor Productions. He does a lot of cool things. Andrew, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
And tell us about what these two Gen Z young people just said to you about creativity. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I can speak specifically to my high school experience if you want me to.
Yeah, do that. That'd be very cool.
So for me, in the preamble, we talked a little bit about, so my high school was Miles Macdonnell. At that time, they were promoting the International Baccalaureate program, or the IB program. So the IB program, basically an advanced academic program. So I think they pitched it to me in the 8th or 9th grade, and a few friends and I decided that we would go for it at Miles Mac. And so ended up in a high school where we were all our other friends went to River East. So it was a little bit of a strange thing in high school to deliberately choose to go to a neighboring high school, which seems very far away when you're that age. And it practically is in a lot of ways. We would go back for the dances and things, but essentially me and my little enclave of friends were kind of alone. And of course, most of the other students at that school either live in the neighborhood or near to the neighborhood. Some were attracted by the IB program from further away, but that was my experience. Now, the teachers in that program put a lot of extra time into that program, and I'm older and kind of respect how much energy they put into it. And for us, because at that time you tend to take it for granted, right? You don't think much about what's operating the high school that you're going to. You just think about your part in it selfishly, because that's what you're like at that age. They piled a lot of homework on us, which meant that you really had to be responsible for your time after school. Whereas a lot of my peers in high school were really having a lot of time for extracurricular activity, including creative things. Ours was quite limited by just the burden of structure and homework. The positive side of that, though, is by the time we got through to, say, grade 11, most of our required higher school courses were done. And so now you actually are a little older and you have the capacity to do more creative things, and you potentially have more time to do that. So for me, it was very heavily weighted in high school towards the first year and a half, being very, very busy and having to develop really structured skills to get the homework done to succeed and go through it. But then the second half of high school, I had a lot of time to myself.
Hey, that's a great point, because there is a certain structure even to creativity. Do you think, Andrew? And there's certain knowledge you need to develop and find, right? So that you can begin to extend and think and push and problem solve and identify and look for new possibilities. So as much as the IB program, I taught in an advanced placement program, and it was the same kind of thing where we were just grinding these kids down with so much poetry, but I can't believe how much they were learning and sponging up. Did we have enough creativity in it? Probably not. Did you feel like there was enough? Was it building your creativity to be in that structured environment in that context?
It was building my accountability, right? So what you need to succeed, especially if you're going to take an unusual path, and I think you'll find today my path in career-wise has been quite unusual, is the first thing you need is a little bit of personal responsibility and accountability, and you need to be driven so that you know when you set a goal for yourself, you can get it done. even with the temptations of socializing, the temptations of other things you might want to do with your friends, if you're really focused on that goal, you put it first and you make sure you set the time aside to succeed at it. So even just as mundane as doing homework and all the traditional topics that we did in school was, it taught me a really good self-discipline skill. It was one of the things, one of two sort of self-discipline skills I learned in high school around that time. The other being bodybuilding, which I got into. I was never a team sports person. It just wasn't my thing. And to this day, I kind of, any sport that I do tends to be like a lone wolf kind of sport, which is not great for the social life. But I got into bodybuilding really just in junior high because my friends were doing it. And at lunch hours, I found I was by myself in grade 8 and nobody to hang out with. So I was like kind of sad.
They all dropped off.
They literally just, one of the guy's older brothers was working out and was competing. He was in high school already. He was like the captain of the football team or whatever. And so then suddenly all my friends were gone. I one day in grade 8, I realized I had no one to hang out with during lunch hour. At that period where you're transitioning from being a child to kind of an adolescent, you're kind of figuring out, are you playing during lunch hour or are you hanging out with your cool friends? So I had a friend down the street from where I lived who had a weight set, and he would do this Rocky Balboa style workout where he'd get up in the morning and jog around the block and drink a bunch of raw eggs and things like that. And I remember saying to him, his name is Jim, I said, Jim, it was summer holidays before grade 9. I said, let's go see how much we could bench press. And he was like, what? You're like a nerd. You're like a computer nerd. Why do you want to do that? So as weird as this story sounds, I would literally go to his house to work out every day because I didn't have any equipment. And it was still summer holidays. And his parents were so nice that they would just let this random kid come over. Even when my friend wasn't working, I can remember them eating dinner and me like working out in like their living room where they had the weights set. It's like you could make a TV series out of it. It was so strange. But why I bring it up is I actually ended up getting serious about it. And by the time we got to high school, most of my friends had stopped working out. I ended up competing in bodybuilding competitions, and I was in 1989 the provincial heavyweight champion in what would now be called the junior provincials. At that time, it was called the high school's bodybuilding competition. And so that's another thing. Whenever I wasn't, doing homework, I was focusing on intensive workouts and training for competition and dieting, right? You have to learn a lot. Now people are really getting into manipulation of dieting to get lean body mass, but I was somebody who was doing that. Also taught me how to cook a little bit because I was cooking my own meals, which my mom thought I was crazy, like to reduce my body fat over about a 3-month period before each competition. So I know this sounds strange from creativity, but I'm starting from the basis for me, which was accountability and focus and self-motivation for homework. And on the other hand, accountability and self-motivation for workouts and ultimately some competition goals. Ultimately, I would decide competing was some kind of corny and not something I wanted to do. But after I won that provincial championship, was kind of unlikely for a nerdy kid who just really dedicated himself from, I guess, the 9th grade to the 12th grade. It did feel like a great sense of accomplishment, and I still work out 4 or 5 times a week to this day, and it just brings me great relief from the stresses of adult life.
Oh, that's amazing. So you found your way kind of turning into yourself a lot, though, right? Like instead of the team thing. So for me, when I was growing up, I was desperately wanting to be accepted. I didn't want to be different. I wanted to hang out with a group. How did you find that seed in you where you said, I'm just going to do what I want, man. I don't care what anyone else is doing, and I'm just going to follow my own path. Like I don't know if is that incredibly mature when you look back at it. What are you thinking about that? Because I'm looking at, please accept me. And you didn't think that way. I was never
too worried about that. I still really am not too worried.
That's pretty cool, man.
I'd rather actually kind of be a bit of a weirdo. I'm totally fine with. I'd much rather be somebody who, like, what's the deal with that guy? Like, they don't. Like, at least people are curious about you, right? I never really sought just to be one of the crowd. That was not ever really an objective of mine too much. Now, having said that, I had a girlfriend pretty much all throughout high school. I had more than one group of friends because I had a group of friends that I'd come to the high school with, and then of course you meet new kids when you're there, and so then I had other friends through the IB program, and that actually the high school was very diverse. We had a very diverse group of people that were taking all kinds of different programming there, and I think that actually was a better fit for me. Also, Miles Mac, just to give it a little bit of praise at the time I went there, was a very low-key school. River East was much more like football team and like it definitely had its crowd, and it's, as a teacher, I don't know how you saw that, but my brother went there, and he's a couple of years younger, but definitely it was one of those high schools.
Well, it was a high-end school. I think in the division it was the golden child of the division, right, at that time. Yeah. And it had this reputation as one of the places you want to go if you want to play football, if you want to be a sports person, if you want to be. I think that's all diminished now. I think they're all kind of on the same level and they do their own things.
Did you ever consider being a personal trainer for like someone?
No, it never was really, because of the academic side of my life, it never was really something I thought about. But I have trained over my course of my life a number of different friends, girlfriends, anybody who asked, for a little bit of help to share my joy of working out. I mean, sadly, in most cases, people don't stick with it. That's just the reality of most people and their relationship to exercise, because other things in life take priority. But there are those of us, you see those people in the gym. I'm actually this summer, in August, it'll be 40 years since I started working out, which probably just seems like a insane amount of time to my young co-hosts here. Like, it seems unfathomable.
And you've done that consistently for 40 years.
I've never stopped working out in 40 years. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Yeah. That's commitment. And that's like my brother always bugs me. When I used to work out, I don't anymore, but your body's your temple kind of thing. You treat your body as something that you got to care for and nurture. And that's pretty cool stuff. I wonder, when you leave high school now, you're thinking, what am I going to do in my life? In your high school life, what were you thinking as you walked through the hallways? What should I do? Because I noticed you're also musical, right? You played in a band as well too, right? So what was going through your brain about, okay, what are my next steps? And did you ever have this sense of, I have to choose something, or I'm just going to start looking around and seeing what sticks?
Well, I played briefly in the band in junior high, elementary and junior high. I played the flute. I was forced to play the flute because my mom wanted to play in an adult band, and she only wanted to rent one instrument. My parents were economizing. They're like, we can't afford to rent two instruments. We're doing one, and your mom wants to play the flute, so you're playing the flute. I'm like, okay.
Tuba was out, I guess.
Yeah, I wanted to play the drums, so I was not allowed to get to play the drums with all the cool boys at the back. But yeah, no, I played the flute. And then I took organ lessons. I took the Yamaha Electone organ lesson. And actually, the biggest spin-off from that, aside from just obviously developing my ability in a basic way to read music and to play keyboards, which is something I still utilize occasionally to this day, but it was very helpful to get me into my chosen career, is that I went to, in the later part of my studies, to the Yamaha Electone Music School at Major and Minor Music in St. Boniface.
Oh, I remember that place.
And that is no longer there, although the building still is. That's 2 blocks now from where I own my studio. I have no connection to St. Boniface. And I randomly ended up owning a recording studio 2 blocks away from where I actually took lessons in the 1980s when it was a booming music store. I remember it was like a happening place in the 1980s. That's a weird random Winnipeg thing.
That's a weird serendipity, right?
But yeah, I didn't really answer your question. But yeah, fully, we were talking about career-wise. A friend of mine in the 9th grade said, Andrew and I are going to be lawyers. I think they gave us some aptitude tests, and we looked at our results, and one of the things my friend and I had on it was law. And I didn't really think much about it and care one way or another, but they kind of planted that idea in my head. So by the time I got out of high school and into undergraduate arts, the one downside of high school for me, I don't know what it's been like for you folks, but is that I started doing poorly on certain science things like chemistry. I started failing chemistry tests in the IB program. And that was bad for me because I loved science. And I really had this idea that I might go out and become a scientist, and many of my peers did. And it kind of dampened my enthusiasm for a career in science because I just saw that I wasn't succeeding. I was doing super well, getting excellent marks in history and English and, with liberal arts type topics. And I was doing okay in physics, and I was doing okay in some of the science topics, but chemistry just crushed me. And no matter how hard I studied, I was getting D's, I was getting C's, which I'd never had into my life at that point. So it kind of basically took off the table for me, sadly, a career in science, because of course it's very competitive once you get to university. And if you're going to want to, if you're a high functioning student the way I was, you're like, well, I'm not going to go in there and start failing or getting C's. I'm not here to get C's. I'm here to get A's and A pluses. So it pretty much took me out of that. I continue to maintain a love of science and of technology, which has been a big part of my creative life as well too. But it took the career part off the table for me. So that was the one negative thing in high school for me.
I have a feeling you could tackle that chemistry course now.
Well, I probably could have even a few years later. I mean, everybody matures at different rates,
exactly,
and I think my science maturity was probably 5 years later.
Yes,
and that's something that you folks should think about, younger members of our panel here, that everybody matures differently. And so obviously my language and liberal arts skills were far ahead of any kind of scientific skills. And to this day, I'm not a great mathematics person, although I recently read a book on a recording studio on digital audio production where I did all the binary math in my head. I forced myself to do all this binary math in my head just so I could understand the book. And it was not easy. It was very hard for me. But I wanted to understand in a deeper way this 500-page or so book on a topic that I'm very, very deeply interested in, technically understand what it was talking about.
That's interesting, Andrew, because I talk to many students who get turned off of math, for example, because the system wasn't working for them. The voice wasn't the right one for them at that time. It wasn't coming to them as easily as some of the other courses. And then 5 years later, they're Red Seal electricians. How did that happen? And when I ask them, they'll simply say, I had to do it. And I just started working at it. And believe it or not, I got better at this. And I actually don't mind math anymore. And I don't understand why that didn't happen for me in high school. And I think you nailed it. There's a certain maturity level where you're ready for certain things. And learning is such a variable concept for everybody. How much you learn, how much you take in, what connects to you, what are your friends taking, what's the teacher's voice? There were some teachers who could teach me anything in high school and others who couldn't teach me how to lift a brick because I just wasn't connecting to the way they were doing it and the way they were telling it. And it wasn't a diminishment of them. It was just their teaching style. And it just didn't connect to me. That's pretty cool. So I see this evolving person now. So you're gravitating to the arts because you pretty much think, I'm good at this.
Well, I also think science is kind of out because I'm not that good at it.
Yes.
At least that's what the system is telling me.
Yes, that's what the system tells you.
Yeah. I
Although,
don't want to blame them too much, but yeah, I just wasn't ready to do that kind of science.
Precisely.
And it was forced on you at that time.
I love what you said. You can't blame the system. Learning is such a variable thing. And some things hit us at certain places. They just pique our interest. They just turn us on to stuff. And other things don't at the right time or the wrong time. And fascinating. So you finish an arts degree. And you want to be a lawyer. This is like when I saw you're an audio engineer by trade.
That's my job.
But you started out as a lawyer.
That's true.
So did you practice law? What was that experience like? Because all you're doing is reading.
Well, it was
you're pretty much doing a lot of reading in that program.
Yeah, it's a ton of reading and a certain amount of writing. I mean, yeah, law school, let's put it this way, I really enjoyed my undergraduate degree because I studied a number of topics that I was really personally very interested in. I probably could have spent another year or two in undergraduate because I just wanted to take as many optional courses in all these things that I was so curious about. And not all the courses lived up to their expectation, but I just had a tremendous appetite for knowledge, and undergrad really allowed me to indulge that. So I did undergrad degree. I did a history major, an English minor, and really, really enjoyed it. And almost wish, looking back on it, that I'd not been in such a rush to finish up. You think your time is running out when you're young like that. You think you have to get on with it, and you have to get, your career going. And it is important to be practical like that. But looking back at it from perspective of an almost 55-year-old person, I should have spent an extra year just studying some more stuff I enjoy.
What other courses would you have taken?
Well, just more optional courses,
like astronomy or something?
I did take astronomy, actually.
Okay.
That was my science credit.
Right on.
Because people heard that it was easy. And of course, then the prof had a real chip on his shoulder because he's like, everybody's taking this because they think it's easy. Well, it's not easy. And they gave us hard tests.
Yeah, so I think like a lot of people, like a lot of kids have a misconception that you have to know what you want to be when you grow up, like as a teenager. Obviously, like, you're very well educated. You went to get a history major. You got the Bachelor of Arts. You got the law degree, like, and now you're an audio engineer. Like, how did you go from being like wanting to be a lawyer, I guess, to becoming an audio engineer now?
It's a winding path, and if there's one lesson, I'll just preview it for you guys to take out of it, is that you'll probably get where you want to go in life if you persist hard enough, if you put the work in, but you're probably not going to take the path that you thought. That's probably the one thing that, one of the most important lessons life has taught me, is that you'll get there. You'll get to where you want to go eventually. And I have a story that I think mirrors that perfectly. So for me, I'll try and keep it to the Cole's Notes version of the story. But essentially, did the undergraduate degree, got into law school, in undergraduate, in science, everybody's trying to get into medicine and they're trying to get into pharmacy and dentistry and all that stuff. In arts, it was more limited in terms of your options for a quote unquote professional career. Most people were trying to get into law school. So thousands of people apply to the law school. In my case, I just stayed here at U of M and went to Robson Hall, the U of M law school. Thousands of people apply, but only a small amount of them get in. I got like an unconditional early acceptance, which now means nothing to me, but at that time it essentially meant that in my final year of arts, I could relax because I was, I think by January, accepted into law school. So I didn't have to worry about, whereas, there were some students in our program who didn't join until like a month into the law school program because a spot became available for them and they were on the waiting list, for example. So it gave me a lot of peace of mind, coming out of undergraduate degree, that I would have that spot waiting for me. But as soon as I got to law school, there were already murmurings right in first year that I saw amongst the second year students about how difficult the job market was. So you're so excited, you come into law school, you think, I'm one of thousands of people that applied. I'm a part of this small elite group that gets in. I'm feeling really good about myself. I'm really feeling good about my future career prospects. And then there were these like dark murmurings of like, there's no jobs out there. It's really difficult. By second year in law school, you have to land an articling position, essentially an apprenticeship with a law firm. And if you don't get that, you can't article, which is that apprenticeship, and you can't get your call to the bar, which is your license to practice law, in this case in Manitoba. So it's really scary. Like, I'm going to spend all this money. I'm going to spend 3 years on this law degree and maybe not get a job, maybe not be able to article. It's like the most terrifying proposition for all these great students who are used to just succeeding. Me and all my peers are the top from across Canada. You know, there are lots of people from Ontario that couldn't get into the Ontario schools, almost half of our class that came here, a bunch from BC, and then a bunch from Manitoba and other places, which was great because I developed friends from all around the country. In law school, I had a band. I had a metal band that I had formed, and my drummer of the band was from law school, and the other guys were just buddies of mine. I worked at Safeway all throughout undergraduate, and actually all throughout law school. So I had some Safeway buddies in that, and we formed a band.
Okay, what was the name of the band?
It's called Fecomancer.
Fecomancer. Okay.
You'll regret that you asked some of these questions. We were like a death metal grindcore band, and nobody in the band liked death metal except for me. I kind of forced them to play it. They just wanted to be in a band. But my dad knew a guy with a recording studio, and we went in and we recorded a little 20-minute cassette EP. It was actually quite a good studio for the time. I wasn't interested in the studio at all. It's funny to think here I am, you know, it's my whole life is dedicated to recording now. I went in there and all I could think about was the end product. I went into this recording studio with this mixing board and its booth and all this stuff, and I have like a few memories of being in there, but I had almost no technical interest whatsoever. I see bands like that come in all the time now where there's one person who's really interested in the process of what are we doing in the studio, and the rest of the people are there like, they could care less. They just want to have a recording out. They want to play some shows. I was one of those people that was really marginally interested in recording at that time. That's back in about, I guess, 1992. But what it did force me to do is the drummer from my band, or maybe it was 93, but the drummer from my band went back to Ottawa, where he was from, to continue law school there. He was able to transfer back to his law school, where it would be more affordable for him to continue. So I was maybe about a month away from going into the studio, or a couple of weeks, and we lost our drummer. But we had this time booked. So I went down to Long McQuay, the retail store that also rents instruments, and I rented a drum machine. And I sat down with the manual, and I taught myself how to use this drum machine, and I rewrote the drum parts just out of necessity, because I'm like, well, we're going to go into the studio, and I don't want to waste this opportunity. So I crudely reproduced the drum parts. But that is really the beginning of me doing a first music production thing as relates to a project. So that really is a very important moment for me, to your question, that the first real kind of independent, I'm going to produce some aspect of music myself without even actually at this point being really interested in the recording process, was the necessity of filling those drum parts in. So that was number one. Number two, at the gym where I worked out, I had a friend, and he's a guy that I just kind of met backstage at some of the bodybuilding competitions. He was helping out, and he was about 10 years older than me, a competitor himself. And he had actually like a hardcore band, and he had another guy, his name was Maurice, and another friend of mine, Chris. Maurice introduced me to Chris at the gym, who was this other big bodybuilder guy that Maurice knew. And Chris was the guitarist in his band. And they had a disagreement at some point about a year later, and Maurice kicked Chris out of the band. And Chris's grandfather had just died within that year, and he'd left him a small $10,000 inheritance, and Chris used that money to all buy studio equipment. So he was living and working with his family business out in the Morden-Winkler area. So here he is, kind of isolated in Morden-Winkler at that time, not a very happening place, and he's working in the family business, and he has this little studio's worth of equipment, but he's not in a band anymore. So he and I talked about my kind of desire to maybe do something more with music production. This is, maybe a couple of years after my renting that drum machine and doing this little EP, and we released it amongst our friends and forgot about it. And so I went down to Morden.
Is that thing still out there somewhere?
Oh yeah, people are holding many of my early tapes for blackmail. There's one guy specifically who worked at a local music store who was ready to blackmail me. Right, he's like, I'm hanging on to these, because we had numerous albums.
It's like an old Beatles tape they find. Oh my god.
Well, this will be more embarrassing, but definitely more embarrassing. No, there's people that are holding on for black. If I ever decide to have political aspirations or anything, they're ready. They're ready to go. Even if it's just a very local minor role. So I'll pause talking in a second to let you guys jump in, but that was the second thing for me, that I went to Chris's studio, and I was a little more technically inclined than him. So when he would get called away to work, I would be left for hours with manuals and his equipment, and I would sit there and, for 4 hours or something, I would just try and figure out how to use the mixing board or how to use some of the equipment that we were left with there. So I started to develop a real enjoyment of the technical side of recording. Once again, out of necessity.
And of you digging in it and
Yeah.
you figuring it out. Did you like that part about it? Like,
Well,
are you
yeah.
that kind of learner? Just leave me alone with this manual and stuff, and I'll figure out how to do this.
Oh, it's still my favorite part of learning. I mean, most recently, just to jump forward to the last 3 years, we decided to install a Dolby Atmos immersive sound system in my studio, the first studio in Winnipeg, and one of the few in Western Canada to do it. And so for the first time in many years, I actually had to learn something like completely complicated and new from the ground up. And it was frustrating at times, but it was so nice to be back to that place. After years of just, you turn your stuff on and maybe you troubleshoot here or there, but it pretty much just works. You've got everything set up. You don't really think about your tools. Now suddenly my assistant and I are like trying to figure out how to get sound out of this thing, like taking me right back to the beginning of me setting up my first ever recording.
So you're a state-of-the-art studio. You would consider that yourself a pretty high-end studio at this time.
I think technologically, yeah. I mean, we're modest in the sense that we set ourselves up kind of like a big home studio. Not to knock our setup, but because we teach audio production, because we encourage our clients, we have from the beginning, to do as much audio production on computer themselves as they can. We've never seen that as a threat. We see that as an opportunity in the marketplace. Yes. We have set ourselves up as kind of like the ultimate example of that, as opposed to being like a big mixing board and behind the glass in a traditional recording room. We've never been anything like that. We're a bunch of computers, acoustically treated environment, a booth, and then basically laptops as well.
Well, you attract a lot of major players who come into your studio. Is part of that because of your ability to work in this technological environment at the highest level?
I mean, I like to think that you never really know what brings people to you, but we've had the opportunity to work with pretty much almost every major media brand out there, and we've been fortunate to have some Hollywood celebrities in because, let's be fair, Winnipeg's film industry has brought in some pretty cool people and projects in the last 10 years, particularly in the last 5 or so of those 10 years, but certainly in the last 10 years or so, and that's a big effort by the province and all the industry here. And we've developed this interesting niche doing some dubbing for Hollywood film and television when some of the stars are in town. And we've had this really unusual opportunity to have high-level projects connect to us remotely through LA and Hollywood, and then to have that talent in the studio, which we never expected, but it kind of has happened, and it's brought some really unique opportunities.
I was gonna ask, is all your technical work self-taught? Did you teach yourself all that stuff?
Yeah, all my audio production is completely self-taught. I've never had any formal training whatsoever in any of it. The closest thing to formal training is I went down to Apple years ago because I'm on the board at New Media Manitoba. At that time, I was doing some contract training for them in Logic Pro, one of the audio production programs out there. They sent me down to Cupertino to do an Apple certification training course, which was pretty neat. That was a cool opportunity. But by that point, I was already a professional audio engineer for a decade, or more. So, yeah, so nothing really formal.
Yeah, so you're pretty much self-taught in everything you do, right? Did you prefer that kind of kinesthetic hands-on learning to as opposed to when you were in university, you they kind of gave you get a book,
a visual learner?
Yeah, you get a book and you write a test and you study like that?
I mean, yeah, I think once again, going back to the IB program, that taught me the self-discipline, bodybuilding taught me the self-discipline, and then law school, which I didn't really address too much, which I quite frankly didn't enjoy that much. I got my call to the bar. I articled, got my call to the bar, which means I became a lawyer, and then I half-heartedly pursued a job. The market was poor, and I never worked as a lawyer after that. I did other things, which we don't have to get into. I can come up later if you ask, which led me eventually to running my own business, few not super successful but good learning experience businesses, and then ultimately the one which I still do, which is the recording studio. So there's no question that independent learner thing came out of all of those experiences, but law school was a piece of the puzzle in that it really shapes your mind. Prior to going into law school, I would say my ability to argue logically and to do analytical reasoning was pretty muddled. And I thought I was really on the ball, but it was really pretty muddled. And by the time I came out of third year law, I had, I think, a much better ability to articulate myself in a logical fashion and then to solve problems, which, that type of reasoning. So yes, those all contributed to me learning this stuff. And yes, when you have a passion for it, but you also have those other discipline skills, you can really apply yourself.
Yeah, there's no learning that's going to set you back, is there?
No, it's just, I just absolutely love it. And to this day, my greatest pleasure, we get a new plugin or we get something new, like I was talking about the Dolby Atmos system, which is more complicated than most things I might tackle. We spent about 3 years learning how to use it and setting it up and all that stuff and tweaking it. But that's the most wonderful flow state that you get into while learning that stuff, and then the incredible sense of accomplishment.
So, what exactly is Precursor Productions?
So we're a recording studio and audio post-production facility. So we started off with mostly music recording, mixing, and mastering, which when people think of a recording studio, you usually think about bands and recording and musical artists. And our whole thing is that we made an early decision in 1999 when we did our business plan to use computer software, which at that time seemed like heresy, and people were suspicious and hostile. They'd come into the studio and they'd just see a bunch of computer workstations. At those time, they were the ugly desktop workstations. They'd say, "What are you guys doing here? Making video game music? I don't see any traditional recording studio stuff." People just did not understand what we did. About 10 years later, when iPads and smartphones and all that stuff came out, all of a sudden people in the public kind of understood that computers were a big part of creativity, and we had a much smaller barrier to people understanding our business model. And a great advantage, because we had already invested about 10 years into almost exclusively using software and the latest cutting edge tools to record, edit, mix, and master music. And then we branched out over the years into voiceover. And that includes things like recording podcasts like we're doing here today and whatnot, audiobooks, all that sort of thing. And then we dabbled even early on in film and television stuff, but after for about the last 15 years, we've done a lot more heavy film and television work. So now we're at the point where our revenue mostly comes from film, TV, corporate commercial, and some interactive audio. We still teach audio production classes, which is something we've done from the beginning to help mostly people who are interested in making their own music learn how to do it. It's not really a revenue thing for us. Like, we make money from it, but not a majority of it, but it is a passion. We still love, it keeps me connected to the passion of creating and taking those first steps, and the excitement that I felt. Seeing the students go through that 4 times a year it's invigorating for me, and it renews my interest. Because you get a little bit, you just do this every day and you're like, it just becomes a job after a while. But to see somebody taking their first steps and creating their own piece of music, and to see the passion and excitement in them reminds you every time of the passion and excitement that you felt. You start a business, you think, I'm going to be one of those people. They say it takes 4 to 7 years to become profitable. You think, I'm smart. I went to law school. 2-3 years, we're going to be making money. I'm going to make all the right moves. Like, you're naive that way. And then 9 years in, like, you've been poor for 9 years. You're seeing your peers buying houses and going on vacations and becoming partners in law firms. And you're like, what am I doing this to myself for? Like, why am I madly pursuing this passion, which I still love so much, but it's just not successful for me. And, then people around me were telling me to quit. I had a business partner at the time who says, maybe you should go get a job, So people around you, my mother, even though my parents never pushed me into law school, she never, I think, let go of the fact. It's like, always like, well, you could always go back to law, Andrew. And I'm like, come on, Mom.
You become a politician.
Yeah, it's like, that I don't want to do that. But she just always, once they had that expectation that you could succeed, that's something she could understand. She couldn't at that time understand success in a recording studio. I think in recent years, although it's still a bit weird for her, she has seen the level of success that we've achieved locally, and I think to my mother, it is meaningful at this point, but it took her a long time. So when there's all those voices and people around you, you're questioning yourself, which I never did much in the early days. I was a very confident person due to my previous life experience. But when you really start questioning yourself and you're down in the dumps and you're like, I don't know what I'm going to do here. I want to do this studio thing, but it's just not succeeding. And I've tried, and can't figure out a path forward. That's when in your life, everybody has an equivalent of that. It'd be different for you folks, but an equivalent. When you go back to your core values, and I think, well, once again, like, I could just keep trying to make this thing happen, and I still love it, and I still get so much from it personally. And so that's what drove me forward in those darkest hours. Nobody likes to talk about that stuff. Everybody likes to talk about how successful they are and how great it is. But really, behind almost any successful person are many dark moments of self-doubt, where you're just about ready to pull the plug and you're like, I can't do this to myself anymore. But something keeps you persisting. And for me, that was one of the major pieces of the puzzle was thinking of my dad's experience and how he just didn't get enough time to do the creative stuff he wanted to do. And I'm similarly driven. So I'm like, well, I'm going to try it early in life. There's always opportunity. If I do outlive him later on, I can do some more mundane things to make money. There's always a way to make some money. There's not always a way to be creative.
Yeah, that's a powerful message about taking advantage of opportunity, and that's related to your purpose and core. I think students that'll resonate with students.
I hope so. I mean, it's different for everybody.
It totally will. It's a powerful story. Mm-hmm. Hey, we're going to do something called, if you don't mind, quick cues, and Zach is going to explain it to you.
All right, so we do something called Quick Cues. It's a quick series of this or that questions just to get to know you a little better. So if you're ready.
I'm ready. I'm always ready.
Begin. All right, so music or podcasts?
Music.
All right, iOS or Android?
iOS.
Calling or texting?
Calling.
Work from home or from the studio?
Well, in my case, I actually have a home built onto my studio, so I have to say I have to say both.
High school or university?
University.
Sports game or a concert?
Concert.
Flying or driving?
They're both good in different contexts. I'll say driving in this case.
All right, Star Trek or Star Wars?
That's a tough one. Because last summer we had Mark Hamill, Luke Skywalker at our studio briefly, so just going to drop that in there. So I feel like I probably have to say Star Wars, although I love Star Trek too, which I know is sacrilege.
Awesome.
It's this or that.
Yeah, I know. It's one or the. It's a binary question.
Keep asking.
I'm making life
This one's a
difficult
little
for
easier.
you.
We
here.
got
You got to help me out here.
Headphones or AirPods?
Headphones.
An adventure
I should
or
say
relaxation?
speakers. Adventure or relaxation? Adventure.
Oh, and what's the best podcast?
The one that I'm currently on. Actually, my wife has a podcast. So,
Okay.
so you didn't hear that from me.
Hey, Andrew, you're a thoughtful person who's been on a journey that is constantly trying to connect the dots of all the ones you collect. You've collected so many amazing ones. If you were to talk to a grade 11 group and you're in a classroom, what small piece of advice would you give them about what you've learned and about what's the best way to find your best self?
Well, I think everybody has to figure out what's going to work for them, because the reality is we're all different. And that sounds trite, but like we talked about, just the learning discrepancies, right? Some students, when they're 16, 17 years old, are totally ready to learn advanced chemistry, and some, like me, are just not ready for that. So I think you have to figure out where you are in terms of where you're at that point in your life and what you're ready to be able to do at that time. And that continues to evolve and change, right? I was very late to the party, just as a quick example. I don't want to drag my answer out too much, but I am a little verbose. But I was very late to the party with my business in learning how to delegate properly, right? And so in recent years, I struggled and figured out a way to, be able to afford to hire other people to do the work, which most entrepreneurs do early on. I was very late to doing that and worked insane hours as a result. And just also how to let go of that work, right? So what I'm getting at is that I'm still, like any person, struggling with some aspects of what to do well, So it might have been chemistry in high school, but it's been delegation in recent years. So you got to take a look at where you're at, what you're capable of, and what things are just not going to be possible for you right now. Like, know yourself, right? And get to learn about yourself. Because it's easy to go through life without really knowing yourself and where you're at, but a little bit of self-reflection, which I think, once again, for me, the solitary activities of riding my bike, which I still do, take my mountain bike out for a 2 or 3 hour ride sometimes by myself, of working out in the gym, which is a great relief from all the other pressures of the day. I don't wear headphones, I don't listen to music, I just enjoy the noise and the chaos and just let my mind wander for that couple of hours a day or whatever it is. Those are the opportunities where you get a chance for some self-reflection. And I think in our society today, in our technological age of distraction, self-reflection is perhaps one of the hardest things to do. So I know it's a bit philosophical for high school, but
I love it.
But that's what I got.
Well, and
Yeah.
you're the kind of person who's demonstrated to us that you kind of have to sift through that noise, and it's all around you. It's impacting you. It's absorbing you sometime. You got to sift through, and you got to find the right things that work for you, and you got to gravitate to the right things and make the good calls. It's been a great story, Andrew, and what a privilege having you in the studio. We appreciate you being here. Thank you so much, sir.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure and an honor to be on this podcast.
Wow. You hear that, gentleman and lady? And what a wonderful thing. And that's it. You know what? Adventures in Careerland is on all of your favorite social media outlets, and it's also on your podcast platforms. We hope you listen to it. To our 7 or 8 listeners, we hope we've increased your knowledge on this special day. And that's it for another edition of Adventures in Careerland. Woo!